I'm only protective, not of the movie, but I'm kind of really protective of Paul. Like, like if people approach me about it, I'm always like, are we friends? Are we going to be friends? I'm always like, don't you fucking say a word about that guy because I'll punch you in the face. Like this asshole comes back to me. I just want to talk about his movie, and this is what he does. When after I wrote that email to you just asking how do you feel about it, I was like, oh, it's coming off as like I'm worried about the thing, and I'm like, oh no, I'm not. I was like, oh, it's just because I'm worried about people who are unkind to Paul when I can't think. Was he unkind to anybody? Not really.
In 1978, Paul Reubens was in the Groundlings improvisational troupe in Los Angeles. He decided to try out a character that couldn't remember the punchline to jokes, which eventually became one of the most iconic comedy characters of all time. Pee-wee Herman is like an 80s version of Charlie Chaplin, complete with iconic suit and inability to gracefully fit into society. Its creator, Paul Reubens, is in a Daniel Day-Lewis-like state of commitment. He's so invested in every moment as Pee-wee, so wired with energy, it's almost as if he's possessed by the man-boy character. Reubens' stardom rose with the character, but eventually ran into a series of scandals that left the character without a place in the world. It was a cruel twist of fate for the Pee-wee character, who was based on understanding of all outsiders, weirdos, and troubled souls. By the year 2016, perhaps the world was ready to forgive, or simply didn't care about Reubens' scandals anymore. Or, better yet, didn't want to live in a world without the magic of Pee-wee Herman. Reubens had a stint on Broadway as the character, but this would be his full return to feature-length movies. And just how much had the world changed since Pee-wee was born? The movie would be made and released by Netflix. Interestingly enough, the world also stayed the same, because the man who directed the film was partly inspired by Pee-wee to make his own off-the-wall kids show, Wonderchosen. Here's director John Lee.
I was on the verge of making the first season of Neon Joe Werewolf Hunter with John Glazer. We've produced most of his shows, and because there was some mix-em-ups and switchemaroos at Adult Swim, they put us on pause. They're like, hey, you guys need to, we don't actually have the money. We have to wait for 6 months. We're doing the show, but can you guys wait for 6 months? That's what happens in television sometimes when they change people or they have so much money they either got to spend it or they got to wait for it. So we had to be on pause for 6 months, and so I called my agents. I had agents. I don't call them that much just because I've been a self-generator for so long, and I just said, hey, I'm free for 6 months. Is there anything? Is there anything to do? And Alan Haldeman was like, I'm sending you a script right now. Read it tonight. And I was like, okay, that seems like kind of quick. And then he sent it to me, and it said Pee-wee's Big Holiday, and I was like, is this real? Is this not real? Like, I grew up a huge fan of Pee-wee. I'm in the fan club as a kid. Like, I followed him, and then starting in like high school, probably when the TV show comes out, which it dates me, tells you how old I am. I enjoyed his Glee, and I followed it, but a little less and a little less as it went on and on and on. But always like I admired his like vision for the world and what he was trying to say for the world and what he was trying to promote. All things that you look now, and his inclusion of like diversity on like gender and race, of like types and archetypes, and destroying those things are like all the things that people are finally kind of gleefully celebrating. He was there, I don't know what is now 30 to 40 years ago. He's on the forefront of that, in many, many ways. And so I always just really admired that and respected that, and also just loved his kind of just goofy, crazy humor. then I read the script, and I'm basically, I was like, sure, of course I'm interested in making a Pee-wee Herman movie, of course. And he's like, so, well, great, they'll want to meet you. They're totally interested in meeting you, but you weren't available, so I didn't bring it up, but now you are. And they're like, do you happen to be going out to Los Angeles anytime soon? So I just went to a meeting at Judd Apatow's office. I got put in this kind of like storage closet because Paul was running late, and then I don't really get that nervous about in meetings. For some reason, I just go approach them as either they're going to like me and like my perspective or not, and I'm going to tell them what I think about the script, and either they'll like that or not. But for this one, I was fairly nervous just because of Paul. And it was probably also because of excitement. But we basically had a fairly long meeting, I'd say 1 to 2 hours of just like talking about the script and what I thought of the script. And I think Judd just really wanted to capture the Pee-wee kind of adventure. I know they had several ideas of scripts. There were different, Paul has other ideas, and I've talked to him about those ideas. But Judd just wanted to really follow this, and Paul had this like simple idea about being invited to a birthday, and Judd introduced Paul to the other Paul, Paul Rust, and Paul wrote the movie, and to do all that was a couple years. So I think the goal for Judd was always to make a movie. I think for myself and I'm going to speak for Judd, but it was just this kind of admiration for this creative force. And just that he kind of deserves kind of whatever he wants. In my mind, comedically, he's like one of those figures that it's like, let him have what he wants. He's super influential. He's such a big creative force. He surrounds himself with creative people. He just lives the life that we all admire, as a creative person. And so I think Judd just knew him well enough and is just like, I think it's time. No one kind of cares about his scandals. They're kind of irrelevant. The real question is, what did we kind of miss out by obsessing over the wrong thing? What could have happened with Pee-wee if there weren't those things in his life? And I think Judd wanted to like kind of, if he could, like put the clear the air a little bit.
I never even been on an airplane.
No. The only thing you're gonna learn about yourself on a plane is that you like the honey roasted peanuts better than the plain salted. If you're really hungry, the open road is a smorgasbord of life experience. A few days on the open road was worth a lifetime in Fairville. The way I see it, Pee-wee Herman, you got a choice to make. Stick around here, or live a little.
Paul had questions about like, how married was I to kind of jokes that I was pitching and things that I thought they could indulge or they could work on. And I just explained how I was here, kind of. I thought my job was to make his movie the best possible movie it could be. And one of the things I pitched, besides a bunch of jokes and bits, was basically what I thought I could do for this, what I thought Paul could do and what I thought I could do for this movie was give it a lot of emotional heart. The first big adventure is, you're not going to beat that movie as far as iconic kind of comedy movies. It just defines a lot of things, but it doesn't have a lot of heart or emotion in it. There's not like something to really track that modern movies, or what I think kids kind of look for in movies nowadays, which is like heart and feeling. And so I thought that's really where I could bring out a lot of soul in Pee-wee. And if he's having a comeback, after like living through 2 or 1.5 scandals, I thought that was really a key element to really making you like remember what was great about him, is just the true kind of spirit of, and in this particular case, friendship in that movie. After that, it was discussions of like art, the levels of art and how quirky it is. And Paul had known Wonder Chosen, and I think he understood that I was an art forward person. I think Judd thought that saw that I could get this done and had Paul's respect, and Paul saw that I was here to help him make a great movie and not dictate what I thought the movie should be. And so I basically had the meeting. I thought it went well. I spent the rest of my time hanging out with friends in LA, like just like having dinner and like going out and talking to friends about like art and everything. And then like before I'm leaving, I go in to meet my agent, Alan, just to check in and say, oh, how are things? How did it go? And they're like, where have you been? We've been calling you and calling you and calling you. And I was like, no, you haven't. And then they had the wrong number. They had my wrong number, which really just shows how much power I had at that agency. So I don't know who they were calling, but had that person called back, they would have gotten the job. And basically, I got the job on my birthday. It was like it was my birthday, and they're like, "You're hired," and it was really it was a great birthday present.
This film's got everything: thrills, chills, romance. That's right. It's a sexy love story between me and not one, but count 'em, two beautiful women.
Big Top Pee-wee.
I hate to judge movies and and have filmmaking and stuff, but that movie's the circus movie's a bit of a mess in so many ways. And I think it was a movie that tried to be kind of like almost a backlash movie to who Pee-wee was, and it just was unnecessary to have that approach towards Pee-wee. I wanted to ignore all those things and any of that, and I just wanted this movie like part of the aesthetic to this movie, which I think is I think it surprised people, or they didn't quite totally get onto it. I think everyone wanted the kind of Wes Anderson version of Pee-wee. Not everyone, but I think a lot of people were like, why didn't it look like that, like a wet? And I'm just like, why would I want to just make another movie that looks like every kid's movie right now? And so I really just chose the aesthetic of when Pee-wee was in the movies, like when he was most popular. Like I really chose a kind of like real American Chevy Chase kind of look of a movie. Like I didn't, they're like, do you want drones over the cars? And I was like, gross. No. Like let's do like what let's just imagine Bill Murray's in this with Chevy Chase, and we just like have the tripod on the side of the road and we pan with them. Like I wanted this movie to look really like a classic American movie. And I think it's a very subtle aesthetic. I don't know if everyone got it. I still think it holds up as far as that, because I think you can't really date this movie that much, except for a couple like slow motion kind of moments and like a couple kind of camera trick moments. I wanted it to feel really classic, and Tim or the DP and I just talked about that a lot. Like, how do we make this look not totally like a throwback, because I don't want to make a retro movie, but just feel like this is like, did this happen right after Big Adventure and before the circus movie, or when was this made? And we de-aged him to a point where we didn't make him really young. We made him just look about that young. The aging process was a massive undertaking. Like he's in almost every frame of that movie. And so like, I don't know, I spent hours and hours and hours just like really going over de-aging him, but making it look natural. I've seen plenty of de-aging where I'm just like, ooh boy, that just looks terrible, and it looks fake and prosthetic. And I spent a lot of time making sure you couldn't tell. He would come in into the sessions after I'd done a bunch of work, and he's like, did you do anything on these shots? And I'd be like, yeah. And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, do you want to see the before? And then we'd click on the before and he would just cry. And he's like, oh my God, it's over. I'm done. He just like suddenly his whole face would just age like with a click of a button. And, so I think it's so dear to his heart. That character is so important to who he is. It's beyond just fame, or it's just beyond just anything, but it is just like part of him. I think it was a lot of work for Paul, and then I think he was definitely very concerned. He's had scandals to deal with, and he's had the kind of friendship that, like the fallout of friendships that had to do with that. And so he was also concerned about his age and how does he keep his energy up and all those things. And so for sure, I think he was worried about it, but I think not in a sinking feeling, but in a way of like, okay, I got to honor this. I got to keep that feeling alive and kind of reconnect with what it was. Like he does have a kind of Mr. Rogers quality in him while also being kind of a little anarchic. And so I wanted to make sure people felt that same feeling they did when they were younger or when they first discovered him. That was a real goal of mine, to make that feeling come across. Which is it's a subtle thing, but I think it's one of the more successful things in that film. I always say that Pee-wee is Mr. Rogers via John Waters. Like to me, that is that's where he sits right in the middle of those two things. I think in my version, I faded away from the John Waters because he's had so many issues, and this was a comeback. I was like, let's just try to not highlight that part of Pee-wee. Let's try to highlight the part of Pee-wee that is just a little bit more sweet and endearing, and just gleeful, it's just fun to be a kid who just likes to eat milkshakes. One of the big things I remember about the movie is there's all these kind of dream sequences in it. And I remember just thinking God damn it, I gotta come up with a Pee-wee dream sequence. Pee-wee Herman. The kind of Fellini-esque one that's in the original movie is pretty darn good. And there's so many great dream sequences in the movie, and I was like, how do you top that? How do you make a great dream sequence with Pee-wee? And then this is where I'm a little similar to Paul. I'm kind of childish. I like to eat ice cream for dinner and stuff. I'm a little bit just a little kid in many, many ways. And I was just I just want I want to see Pee-wee just with fireworks and sundaes, to me, and just a giant, massive cake, And then I was like, oh, let's shoot it on 1,000 frames a second, and let's just we'll do a little tracking shot, and when you shoot on it's called a phantom camera, it shoots 1,000 frames a second. You literally, a take is 5 or 6 seconds, and that is minutes of film. That's minutes of footage. So we just I just was let's get fireworks, let's get a giant cake or a giant ice cream. So we had to get these things made, and then you could only make so many of them because they had to eat it. And so it was just I just really enjoy this idea that Joe and Paul just jumping for joy and glee, and just in a way that no one ever does, but that's how you think about a birthday party. How you think about a birthday party is just jumping all around, celebrating with just ice cream and fireworks and everything behind you. And Paul was I don't understand what you're talking about. I don't get it, and I would just draw pictures of it. And he's I understand what you mean, and I get your references, but what is it? What is this? And then I never want to just say well, you'll see it. You'll see it. So I kept trying to explain it. And eventually we just get to the day, and we film this thing. We light the fireworks. The candles are lit. Light the fireworks. They have spoons, I think. And then I'm action. They just start jumping, and we do this and cut. It's that quick. And the camera's already swept to the other side. And I was you guys have to be so happy the whole time, the biggest grins on your face. Then we do it again. And then you can do playback. And then we played it back. And when you're doing something fun, when everyone comes to watch playback, grips even come to watch, because they're what the fuck is this? It looks like the most strange, perverse waste of time and money possible, that we made this special giant ice cream and cake. And then we have walls of fireworks that also only last 6 seconds. And then we watch it, and it's in super slow motion, and you just see the two of them, and it looks it was just magic. You're just oh, right. This is that feeling. This is the feeling that you think about when you're I'm going to my best friend's party, and it's going to be so fun, And Paul was all right, I get it.
I made this present for you. Happy birthday.
Friendship bracelet.
Right. And look.
It's just like mine.
Yeah.
We knew New York would be the end of the shoot, and we knew I wanted Times Square at night, and so I knew that would be the end of the day. And I wanted it to be the last day where there'd be a big crowd, like, you know, as we're shooting, him just standing there, like looking around. Everyone was just yelling for him and like cheering him on, and I kind of thought he would really enjoy that as an ending. You know, like buses of tourists were going by just going, Pee-wee, Pee-wee, and people were stopping. We had to hold people off so they wouldn't be in the frame. I just thought that would be a nice ending for him, you know, just in the Times Square is a magical place at night if you've never been. You know, it is, no matter what, even though it's the worst tourist place to be, I always tell people to go there at night, and you never regret it. There's something kind of really magical. The glow of the lights is really kind of like beautiful in many ways, and I just thought that was a really nice way to end this movie, and for Paul to feel just kind of this like support and like, you know, kind of like glee and joy and recognition in many ways. I don't kind of care what he did. You know, I've looked into both of them and I understand them fully and I have my own opinions on them. But to me, what I say about it is like, just like what people missed out. Like, you know, he was this guy who was so inclusive and so kind of like showing us all a way to live, right? And showing kids that, and showing adults a model to live, and how to include women and people of color and queer and gay people and like all of that. And I think it's like, I kind of don't care about the scandal. The tragedy to me is that like, what else could he have offered us? Like, what else could he have shown us, you know, that we kind of just closed off to? And I feel like some people approach Pee-wee like that. And I'm always like, you're just missing the point. It's not about a Pee-wee. It's not about Peter Pan. It's not about an adult being an infant. It's actually the same message of Jim Henson, of like respecting feelings and childhood. And it's the same as Mr. Rogers, of like wanting to make sure we connect to those things and value those things in each individual. And like, instead of being disparaging or racist, I would say, you know, or sexist, or, you know, a hater of many things, like he was showing you how to, you don't need to worry about that. And to me, it's like, we fucking missed out on like 15 years of great kind of like magic by obsessing over things that kind of seem petty. And I feel like we still surprisingly live in that kind of world sometimes. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, like what gives you joy? What gives you joy? Like, what do you like in the world? He didn't do anything to anybody really, you know, like, so I don't know. I just feel like we just like, it's nothing has changed really as far as like how to attack people, you know, and how our willingness as a culture just to attack people. You know, I think a lot has changed. We're attacking better targets than we used to, but like, you know, as far as the desire to just like belittle and like dismiss and reduce the individual to like one experience in their life, when some of those people have offered some great things, you know, like I don't think anything else that he's done has been, you know, has caused harm to individuals. I just can't, like any of his scandals just haven't. I can't think who's the victim. It's him, really. That's the sad part of it.
There's a lot of things about me you don't know anything about, Daddy. Things you wouldn't understand. Things you couldn't understand. Things you shouldn't understand.
I don't understand.
You don't want to get mixed up with a guy like me. I'm a loner, Daddy. A rebel.